Now that we have learned how to collect objects into strings and lists, let's learn how to access these objects. There are two main ways to access items in a string or list: indexing and slicing. Indexing allows us to access a single item, while slicing allows us to access any number of items in the order of our choice. Let's check it out. Let's create a string, PyString, and a list, PyList. When we index a list or string, we assign each item in the list or string a sort of address in numerical ascending order. The first item gets assigned 0, and we count up from there. Notice that a space is a character in a string, and so the spaces get their own index too. Also notice that although the last index in the string is 10, the string has length 11 because it has 11 items in it. Now, to access an item in a list or string, we call it by index. Let's say we want the letter K from PyString. Since K is at index 4, we call PyString of 4, where the 4 is in square brackets. This will return a string with one character, K. And if we want 3.14 from our list, we'll call PyList of 0. This will return 3.14, not inside of a list. Let's look at it again in idle. Now, take a minute to figure out what happens if we call PyList of 2 of 2. Well, first we get PyList of 2, which is the list 3, 1, 4. Then we get the item at index 2 of 3, 1, 4, which is 4. Now let's say you want to access more than one item in your string or list. We can use a technique called slicing to grab a slice of a list or a string. From here on out, we'll be using PyString as our example. But remember that every technique we talk about can also be used with lists. Now, what if you have a list or string and you need to get the last item of it, but you don't know how long it is? You can use negative indexing. This time, we start at -1 and count down, going to the left. You can access an item by calling its negative index too. For instance, let's say we wanted the exclamation point. We could call PyString of -1. Or we could call PyString of 10. Now, take a minute and see if you can figure out two ways to get the letter P.
Now let's say you want to access more than one item in your string or list. We can use a technique called slicing to grab a slice of a list or a string. For instance, let's say we want pi from our string, which is really a sequence of 3 items in the string. We can specify a range of indices to access. What happens when we run PyString of 7:9? Uh-oh. Why does that happen? We wanted the pi that we can eat. When a range of indices is specified for a list or a string, Python goes up to, but doesn't include, the item at the last specified index. Thus, if we want PIE, we'll call PyString of 7:10. You can slice using negative indices too. The indices still have to go from left to right, though. So we call pi_string of -4 colon -1, not pi_string of -1 colon -4. Let's say we also wanted to get the exclamation point when we got the word pi. How could we do that? We can't say -4 colon 0 because 0 is the index of the first element in the list. What we do instead is leave off the index at the end of the range. This tells Python to keep going along the string as long as it can. For example, pi_string of -4 colon nothing is pi. This works for positive indices too. For example, pi_string of 2 colon nothing.
Now suppose that we wanted to get multiple items from a list or string that weren't contiguous. Python has a command for that too. Specify the start index, the end index, and the step size between each item you want to get. For instance, to get every other item in the first half of pi_string, we would write pi_string of 0 colon 6 colon 2.
We start with our first index 0 and get the capital I. Then we take a step of 2, so 1, 2, and get the L. We take another step of 2, 3, 4, and get the K. We take another step of 2, 5, 6, where we get to our endpoint. And because this is up to but not including our endpoint, we do not get that space. So this will return ILK.
Finally, there's a really nifty way for you to check whether an item is in a string or a list. The command in. Item in list returns a boolean that is true if the item is in the list or string and false if it isn't. Let's look at some examples. Is the word pi in pi_string? True. Is the word pi in pi_list? False. Is the number 4 in pi_list? False. You now have all the basic tools to process lists and strings. These will come in very handy when your functions return lots of items in the form of lists and strings, and you're only interested in some of them. We'll leave you with the challenge. What commands would you run to make this string read "Hello World"?